What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another amazing what if. Fem Itachi is obsessed with Naruto. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. The ding of the elevator was normally ignored by the employees of Uchiha Enterprises. However, the man that stood in the elevator caused every head to turn in his direction because he was impossible to ignore. Power and confidence oozed from his frame. Men were attracted to it. Women, and quite a few men, were attracted to him, period. He was the true definition of a man, tall, dark, and very handsome. Lean strong body, endless dark eyes that seemed to look into your soul, pale flawless skin and long silky hair that rivaled and beat any females. If one was fortunate enough to hear his voice, it was deep, smooth, like chocolate. It's been said that the clothes make the man. Well, in this case, the man made the clothes. His suit was perfectly tailored and fit him so well, some of the women drooled. He commanded attention without effort. And he got it. But Itachi Uchiha ignored them all from the moment he stepped off the elevator. His face was set in stone as he confidently strolled toward his presidential office suite. His pink-haired secretary saw him coming and smiled, holding up his mail. "Good morning, Mr. Uchiha." He gave her a nod and grabbed the mail and messages in one hand, opening his office door with the other, and disappeared from everyone's view. The moment the door closed, you could hear every woman sigh. Men glared, jealously wishing women would look at them in that way. All eyes returned to their previous positions and it was back to work as normal. Itachi closed the door of his office and looked around with a smirk. He tossed the jacket over the chair and sat down in front of his desk. The first thing he did was change the desk calendar to today's date, June 9th. Then he looked around his office. No balloons, streamers, confetti, cake, or presents, exactly how he wanted it. He sent a memo a week ago threatening to fire anyone that so much as mentioned his birthday. Guess no one wanted to test that possibility. Last year he was given a surprise party by his office. He had scared the entire office to death with his glare and threats to maim. It seems this year they finally got the message. He smirked as he thought about how things had gone. He was 33 years old and president of Uchiha Enterprises. He had been in the enviable position since the age of 27. However, his dear father had tried to keep this from him because he wanted his firstborn to be the one continuing the Uchiha line of geniuses before handing over the reins. Itachi refused to be forced to do anything. Instead, he declined every date his parents or friends set up for him. Finally, his father gave him an ultimatum: find a wife or else. Itachi had raised an eyebrow without a hint of emotion and coolly asked him if he planned on taking the business to the grave. His father may have had a part in giving birth to him, but even he was not immune to the Itachi Uchiha glare. In the end, Itachi got what he wanted, to head Uchiha Enterprises. Sure, his father continued to try to get his way. His mother kept bringing over simpering females who were supposedly of their station. His friends tried setting him up on blind dates. When it seemed he wasn't interested in the female populace, his friends started setting him up on blind dates with males. They all gave up and stopped trying by the time he reached 30 and, to their knowledge, still had not shown a hint of libido. That was something Itachi never really cared much about. No one had struck him that way, male or female. He was too busy to bother with the whole mess anyway. It would only bring more problems. Like he really wanted to marry some female who only considered him to be their trophy. All they would do is flaunt him to their girlfriends and spend his money on any expensive bauble that caught their eye. They'd want him to talk with them. He wondered what they could possibly talk about together. Their pathetic attempts at conversation revolved around gossip, fashion, and men. Scintillating conversation that would be. He didn't need a woman, or a man for that matter. His one and only love was his work. Because of his attitude, he gained the moniker of the Ice King. It started as a joke. But somehow it stuck and even the newspapers and magazines referred to him that way. And Itachi liked it, took pride in it, reveled in using it to the fullest. It made him more intimidating. He turned on his computer. While he waited for it to boot, he looked through his mail and phone messages. Another female proposal, toss. An invitation to a party, toss. Pictures, naked pictures. He raised an eyebrow, toss. About time he got that proposal. He'd been waiting long enough. Love letter, toss. A birthday card, with hearts, definitely toss. He sighed and looked through his email. Oh yes, his brother would be here today presenting some new proposal. That could be interesting. At least it would give him a chance to mess with Sasuke's head. Don't get him wrong, he loved his little brother, but making fun of him was a job he took seriously. Well, considering their brotherly relationship, maybe he should at least put out the welcome mat for him. He pressed the button on his desk phone. Sakura? Her cheery voice rang through the line. Yes, Mr. Uchiha? Please make sure the conference room is prepared for 2 p.m. Do you need any equipment? Just a projector. I'll take care of it, sir. Also, when my brother decides to arrive, please send him in. Yes, sir. He leaned back in the chair and stretched his hands behind his head. Yes, work was all he needed. Sasuke Uchiha was glaring out of his office window. The Dobi was late, again, and they had a meeting with his brother on the other side of town in an hour. Yes, brother. Itachi. The ice cane. Enough said. He brushed a lock of hair out of his face as he looked out the window over the city. He had worked so hard to get where he is now. He and his brother competed over everything. Well, really, if he admitted it to himself, there really was no competition. Itachi excelled at pretty much everything. Success came easily to his older brother. It was annoying how easy. It was like he was born to it. Itachi had such a knack for business that he could almost predict the moves before they happened. On the other hand, he had to work a bit harder to get what he wanted. It didn't mean he wasn't a genius. Obviously, he came from great genes. The Uchiha family was tailor-made for business. However, there are different levels of genius. Itachi just happened to be on the top end of the spectrum. He was gifted at anything and everything. He was groomed to be in his position from the day he was born. Number crunching, planning, and the like, that was what he was good at. When merger talks first began with Hyuga Inc., Itachi was the smooth talker. However, he was the one who took care of the contracts. It wasn't that Itachi couldn't have done it himself, but he didn't want to. So, that became his job. After much deliberation, the Hyugas agreed, the two companies merged, and somehow he ended up with a wife in the contract. He smirked a bit at that. Maybe he should have been a bit more displeased at the idea of his life being written up for him, but he couldn't help but be a little bit happy about it. He wasn't the most social person, there was no denying that. He probably would have never really actively pursued a romantic relationship on his own. That was probably one of the few things he and his brother had in common. But that problem was taken care of for him. Besides, Itachi had always beaten him at everything. For once, at least, he could be ahead of his older brother in something. And considering Itachi's all-nature, his brother wouldn't be catching up anytime soon. Where's that Dobi? I'm gonna kill him. He may act like he's mad, but really, he loves the idiot like a little brother, albeit an annoying one. Naruto Uzumaki. The #1 most unpredictable knuckle-headed businessman he's ever met. It all began after his father first gave him the project of smoothing the transition from Hyuga Inc. to Uchiha Enterprises. This blonde, blue-eyed enigma showed up one day, no appointment, not even dressed for an interview, asking for a job. He walked into the building at the exact moment 5 guards were about to toss the man out the front door. He still wasn't sure what made him stop them. Maybe it was those eyes. They really were something to behold. They held such innocence, yet so much fire. He ended up taking the blonde up to his office. And the rest, you could say, is history. He was loud, obnoxious, almost bordering on rude at times. He had no experience in business whatsoever. He had absolutely no fashion sense. There's no way he should have even thought of hiring him. He became his secretary. Shocking, right? Who ever heard of a male secretary? It ended up being the best decision he'd ever made. He might be loud, rude, obnoxious, add any other adjective you want here. But there was something about him, his smile, laugh, enthusiasm. You name it, he had it. You couldn't help but be drawn to his friendly nature. Every person in the office immediately loved him. He put clients at ease within seconds. He kept him sane, which is pretty important. From day one, he made his coffee just right. He knew, without asking, to screen his phone calls, and he somehow could deal with his mood swings and perfectionist nature. But it wasn't until he overheard him on the phone one day that he knew Naruto's calling was decidedly not in the direction of secretarial work. Sasuke moved away from the picture window and sat down at his desk, tracing the lip of his cup of coffee with an index finger as he mused. One day a client called, angry and ranting about their contract. Sasuke had already informed Naruto earlier that he wouldn't be taking any calls. So, Naruto put him on hold and decided not to bother him about the client unless it got too bad. He just went to the files, found the contract, got back on with the client, and spent the next 20 minutes going through it with him. By the end of the call, both males were laughing and exchanging all kinds of pleasantries. The blonde had somehow smooth-talked his and Uchiha Enterprises' way into the client's good graces. And he didn't even look like he tried hard. It was then that he decided that he'd found his other half. No, obviously not marriage mate. If nothing else, Uchihas were a faithful lot. He would never cheat on his wife. Besides, he was 100% hetero, thank you very much. Although, he wasn't so sure about the dobi. If there was one thing that Sasuke definitely was not good at, it was public relations. As an Uchiha, it was pretty much standard practice that they appear like they were all cold-hearted bastards at heart. Itachi certainly had that ability in spades. He was as cool as a cucumber. Yet, it was the strangest thing. Itachi could somehow transform himself into a kind-hearted person if need be for the public eye. Another ability that he hadn't gotten. So, Naruto Uzumaki had accidentally given Sasuke exactly what he needed most. A good public image. Someone who could smile, laugh, and relate to people. He immediately gave the dobi a new position. Public Relations Manager. That title didn't last very long either. You see, Naruto was also very observant. As the PR man, he had to be in the meetings with clients along with Sasuke. He also had to know the contracts and proposals inside and out. Sasuke tended to get riled up when things did not go his way. Strangely enough, considering the bubbly outgoing personality, Naruto was the one who frequently had the level head. He could talk a good game. More likely than not, when it was all over he would always end up making Sasuke and Uchiha Enterprises come out smelling like a rose. Naruto Uzumaki, Director of Marketing, Public Relations. Sure, he made up the title himself. But is there anyone who could do either job as well as his dobi? Not likely. Really, he had a feeling Naruto could probably rival Itachi in that department. And from that came his newest idea. Itachi had never given anyone a second glance. Truthfully, he really wasn't all that clear on Itachi's preference. However, he was clear on one thing. Itachi really needed to get laid. Just maybe it would get him to lighten up a bit. No one had ever gotten past that cool, Ice King, exterior. However, if there was anyone who could do it, it would be Naruto. So, he decided, this would be his challenge. By the end of this year, Itachi was going to get laid. And it was going to be Naruto who made it happen. Now he only had to convince the blonde to do it. Yote Teme. A blonde whirlwind came through Sasuke's office door, immediately sitting across from him and crossing his feet on the expensive mahogany desk. Sasuke slowly looked down at the shoes first, then back up at Naruto. Dobi, you're late, and if you would be so kind as to take your shoes off of my desk. Yeah, whatever. He waved his hand in dismissal while pulling his feet down. Besides, who says I'm late? We still have 30 minutes or so until this meeting. It's across town, Naruto. Sasuke glared, his eyebrow twitching. Naruto squirmed under the intense glare, raising a hand to rub the back of his head. Heh, then I suppose we should get going, huh? Sasuke rolled his eyes and grabbed Naruto by his black tie with orange spirals as he went past. Dobi, hey, wait, Teme, you're gonna choke me. Let go. Interestingly enough, the younger Uchiha gets the same treatment as his brother. The moment he entered the corridor, with the blonde following behind, all eyes inevitably ended up on him. Mostly female. They all wanted a piece of him. A very specific piece, mind you, even though every single one of them knows he's happily married. A bubbly blonde blue-eyed girl was suddenly blocking his way to the elevator. Mr. Uchiha, I hope you weren't planning to leave without letting me know. She batted her eyelashes at him. Sasuke was tempted to just pick her up and physically remove her from the spot. She was light enough, considering her constant dieting, but he restrained himself. I don't remember having to ask permission, Miss Yamanaka. He couldn't help putting the dig in there about her non-married state. He knew that, right now, she didn't even have a boyfriend. She kept pushing people off, hoping for him to miraculously become senile and think she would be perfect wife material, even if he already had one. Too bad she was a good secretary, or he'd probably have gotten rid of her by now. The ding of the elevator announced its arrival. He brushed past her, pulling Naruto along. Hey, wait, Teme. Quit pulling the threads. Naruto tried to pull away from the grip. He turned his head before the elevator doors closed and addressed the fellow blonde. "Hello Ino." She smiled slightly. "Hello Naruto. At least he's not rude. If only he had the dark features of an Uchiha, she'd be willing to snag him." On the ground floor, they stepped from the elevator and walked toward the street and the waiting limo. People turned and stared at the two. Of course, most of it was because of the dark-haired executive. But the blonde had his share of admirers as well. Together, they made quite an imposing pair. Both males were tall, with Sasuke being an inch or so taller. But that's where the similarities ended. Where Sasuke was pale and slim, Naruto was broader and tanned. Sasuke was dark and sleek. Naruto was bright, almost literally, and pretty much random. His features contrasted completely with the dark suit and shirt he wore, but it only served to highlight what were considered his best features. He had distinctive blonde hair that spiked in every direction and his eyes were so blue the sky paled in comparison. People were drawn to those expressive eyes like flies to honey. Now, the clothes took some working with. Sasuke actually wrote a clothing stipulation into Naruto's contract. Then he had almost literally dragged the blonde shopping. Naruto had yelled and ranted until Sasuke told him he either took the clothes he bought or he wouldn't have a job. After that, Naruto had shut up and let Sasuke do what he wanted. He took the blonde to his favorite places and got him some suits tailored and bought shirts and ties to match. He also bought a couple of pairs of nice and comfortable office shoes. Somehow the ties seemed to have disappeared completely from existence in favor of brighter ones. Sasuke had tried to get him to ditch the orange altogether, really he did. But Naruto refused to part with it completely. He did tone it down though and limited the orange to just his numerous eccentric ties and socks. That had been enough for him. Neither said much during the drive. Sasuke was on his laptop while Naruto went over the presentation in his head. They got to the other Uchiha building 5 minutes late. Naruto tried to ignore the piercing glare he was receiving from the Uchiha the entire way up to the top floor. When the elevators opened, Sasuke stepped out, not even bothering with the receptionist. If she didn't know who he was by now, too bad. It's not like he and Itachi didn't look alike. Of course, it didn't matter much anyway, she was too busy staring to be of any use. They got to Itachi's office and was met by his secretary. Sasuke blinked then raised an eyebrow at Naruto. Naruto shrugged. They communicated like that now and then. It's funny how they could understand each other so well. They were thinking the same thing as they tried not to stare at the bright pink hair. Is that her real hair color? Good afternoon. You must be Mr. Uchiha. Mr. Uchiha, she giggled. I mean the other Mr. Uchiha, has been waiting. She went to her intercom. Mr. Uchiha? His silky deep voice answered. Yes? Your brother is here. Is it okay to send him in? Yes, thank you. She looked at the other Uchiha in front of her and gestured for him to go in. Sasuke nodded and turned to Naruto. Why don't you go set up everything? I'll meet you in a few minutes. No problem, boss. Naruto grinned teasingly at his companion. Sasuke rolled his eyes and walked into the office, aka hell, and closed the door behind him. Itachi was leaning back in his chair when Sasuke walked in. About time you got here, little brother. Sasuke turned and leaned against the door and crossed his arms, glaring at the Ice King. Shut up, it wasn't my fault. So, I hope this presentation is worth my time. Sasuke raised a brow. Do you ever find anything worthy of your time? Of course. Yeah sure, like what? It took all of 2 minutes for Sasuke to be irritated at his brother's superior attitude. Look, let's just get this over with so I can return to life on my side of the world. Itachi smirked. Sasuke stamped down the irrational need to run. Smirking was bad, but I planned to have you stay for lunch. Hell no, I'm not doing lunch with you. Well, I do have a lot to do at my office. Itachi brushed him off. Nonsense, that's what secretaries are for. An hour of your time won't destroy your day. Heh, gotcha little brother. There's no way you can say no. No, an hour of time with you will destroy my mood though. He really wanted to say it aloud, but held back. Fine, but my partner stays too. At least he wouldn't be alone with his sibling and just maybe he could start getting the ball rolling on his plan. If he could get Itachi and Naruto together, maybe his brother would stop being such an ass. But he was getting ahead of himself. Of course. Itachi gave a slight nod. The investors should all be present by now. I suggest we join them. Sasuke got up with Itachi and followed him to the conference room. He could feel every eye following him the entire way. Although, considering where he was, it was probably more because of Itachi than him. Naruto, in the meantime, was left with the pink-haired secretary. So, Ms. Haruno? Where is this conference room? Sakura almost didn't hear him. She was too busy giving him the once-over. He wasn't bad, not as hot as the Uchiha men, but she could tell he was built well under those clothes. Huh? Oh, follow me. She led him to the conference room. Here you are. Is there anything you need? Nah, I've got everything on my trusty laptop. He tapped his case and grinned at the girl. Alright then, I left enough drinks for everyone if they want. The projector is ready to go. You just have to connect your laptop. Great, thanks a lot Ms. Haruno. Another million-watt smile. Sakura smiled back. That smile was contagious. Sakura, call me Sakura. Well, I'm Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki. And you can just call me. He gave her a wink. She laughed. He may not be as handsome as her boss, but he was much more fun. Funny. Very funny. She got to the door of the room. If you need anything, just let me know. Okay, thanks again Sakura. She left and Naruto took a deep breath. He was glad she didn't take that the wrong way. He was joking with her, plus it was his way of relaxing. He was pretty nervous about this presentation, after all. He'd done some pretty important ones the last couple of years, but nothing of this magnitude. Also, Sasuke had talked about his brother before. He wasn't sure how the stoic man or a bunch of old fart investors would react to what he had planned. He set out 12 portfolios and made sure his file on the computer was ready to go. Then he grabbed a water to keep his mouth from going dry. He smiled as investors began to file in one by one, blank faces and all, and take their seats. Last to come in were the two Uchihas. Their youth was quite a contrast to all of the elders in the room. He looked at the older Uchiha and tensed up slightly. He really was an ice king like Sasuke said. Not one bit of expression graced that face. But good God, do all the Uchihas have to be blessed with such great genes? He was quite tall, taller than him. And he was even more handsome than Sasuke. He shook his head to get back on track. When he saw Sasuke he smiled nervously. Sasuke nodded and mouthed, "You'll do fine. Relax." For some reason, just Sasuke's reassurance made him relax. Once everyone had settled, he began. Good afternoon everyone. My name is Naruto Uzumaki and I'm here representing the northern branch of Uchiha Enterprises along with Mr. Sasuke Uchiha. Itachi had stopped tuning in after the name. It's not like he really cared one way or another. He just had to be there because he was president, but it was really the investors' decision after all. All he had to do was sign on the dotted line after the deal was done. Maybe he could check the stocks on his phone. At least he wouldn't be completely bored. His musings were interrupted by chuckles. He looked up and saw the investors smiling a bit. When he looked at Naruto, he had a wide grin on his face. Itachi was intrigued. Maybe I should pay a bit more attention. Look, I'm sure you see these blob presentations complete with slides, graphs and projections all the time. Why should I bore you with another one? You've got portfolios in front of you that give you the same information I would be presenting up here. What the hell are you doing, Dobi? Sasuke narrowed his eyes. Then he glanced at his brother, who actually had a slight smirk on his face. Itachi found this man to be quite interesting. No one ever made the investors laugh during a presentation. Money was not a laughing matter in the business world. Yet this man already had the room in the palm of his hand. He had a presence about him and an energy that seemed to radiate from him. This man commanded a presence, not the same way he did, but it was there nonetheless. Really, it was more of a, "Here I am, take it or leave it," attitude. Somehow, it made everyone relax more. Interesting. I'll have to learn more about this Naruto Uzumaki. He sat back and decided to actually listen. I'm going to show you something much more interesting and fun than those pages of boring statistics. If you want to read during the show, fine with me. But at least you can't say I didn't try to entertain you. Another smile from the blonde, along with a shrug. Chuckles floated through the group again. Was that a good or a bad smirk? Sasuke had begun to ignore the presentation in favor of figuring out what was going on in his brother's head. The man was so poker-faced Sasuke couldn't tell what he was thinking. He wasn't glaring though, so Naruto must be doing okay. But what in the world was Naruto thinking starting his presentation like that? Itachi almost chuckled himself. Uzumaki was actually entertaining, he would give him that. Sasuke had chosen someone worthy of that position. The presentation went on. Sasuke finally stopped trying to figure out his brother and just enjoyed the show. Naruto was a hit. Itachi was impressed, and it takes quite a lot to impress the Ice King. More importantly, the investors were impressed. After it was all over, each investor had made their way over to the blonde to shake his hand and exchange pleasantries. Sasuke nodded at some of them as they left one by one. A few of them came over, shook hands and talked to him for a moment and exchanged business cards. All in all, the presentation was a success. Sasuke shouldn't have had a doubt though. Naruto was a genius at these things, after all. So, lunch? And Sasuke's good mood was instantly shattered. Ooh, we're getting lunch? Awesome. After all this work I'm starving. Good to know Naruto was excited. Then again, any mention of food was enough to make the blonde idiot happy. We haven't actually been formally introduced. Itachi Uchiha. He held out his hand. Naruto grasped it in a firm grip. Well, I guess you know my name I've heard a lot about you. And I'm sure if it was from my little brother here. Itachi ruffled Sasuke's hair just to irritate him, it was all bad. Naruto laughed. Then his stomach growled. Fortunately, the two other males were too busy glaring each other down to notice the noise. Hey, so, what's for lunch? Can we have ramen? I love ramen. Well, that got Sasuke to stop staring. No, but Teme. Naruto resorted to the slight pout he knew his friend couldn't resist. How dare he resort to the pout in front of his brother? Sasuke almost growled. Dobi, come on Teme, please? Now the blonde batted his eyelashes just a bit and Sasuke rolled his eyes in exasperation. Itachi watched from the sidelines, amused at the way the vivacious blonde was able to manipulate his brother. Fine Dobi, whatever. Sasuke shook his head, exasperated at being so easily convinced. Yata! Naruto yelled, linking his arms through the two taller males and pulling them out the room. Sasuke glared while Itachi raised his perfect eyebrow. Hey Sakura, wanna get some ramen with us? Sasuke wanted to die, or at least sink through the floor. The stupid Dobi has no sense of decorum whatsoever. He chanced to look out the corner of his eye and was just in time to see his brother grinning at him. Oh God, he wasn't going to hear the end of it anytime soon. The trio stopped at Sakura's desk while Itachi addressed her. Sakura, please order some ramen from the place down the street and have them deliver it here. Order yourself something as well. What kind would you like? She pulled out a menu and a notepad. You already know my preference. Itachi replied and she nodded, jotting down something on the notepad. Itachi walked into his office, leaving the other two behind. Naruto began before his mouth was covered by Sasuke's hand. Vegetable for me and miso with pork for him. Naruto glared at the offending hand before glaring at Sasuke. He smirked, then looked back at the pinkette. If I don't stop him, he'll order everything on the menu. Naruto groaned and tried to say something, but it was muffled. Ow, what the? Idiot, you bit me. Sasuke glared and smacked Naruto upside the head. Well, don't put your hand where it shouldn't be, bastard. He laughed while Sasuke rubbed the bite marks out of his palm. Sakura watched them with a giggle. Sasuke rolled his eyes and pushed the blonde into the office after his brother. Dobi. Lunch was actually tolerable. At least for Sasuke. He and Itachi weren't at each other's throats. At least not yet. Of course, the civility could probably only be attributed to the blonde, who acted as a buffer. Thank goodness for the Dobi. Ah. I think this is the best ramen I've ever had. Naruto smiled in bliss, leaning back on the cushy leather couch, patting his full belly. Of the three, he was the one that relaxed the most. The knot of his tie had been pulled halfway off, the top two buttons of his shirt were unbuttoned, his jacket had been haphazardly tossed in a chair on the other side of the room. Sasuke, meanwhile, had not even taken off his jacket. He was hoping to make this luncheon as quick as possible. Itachi was also leaning back in his chair, directing his attention to the blonde. It's from a place called Ichiraku's. He's from the old school of ramen cooks. His is the only ramen I will eat. We need one of those by our building. I'd eat it every day. God forbid. Sasuke jumped in. We'd never get you to work then. Naruto turned to his friend with a growl. Shut it, Teme. So, Mr. Uzumaki. Please just Naruto. Alright, Naruto. Then call me Itachi. Anyhow, that presentation of yours, quite an unorthodox style you have. However, it seems to work for you. Sasuke raised an eyebrow. He knew that was the closest Itachi ever came to complimenting anyone. Naruto shrugged and rubbed the back of his head, slightly embarrassed. Yeah. Well, I just kind of tried to make it interesting, you know? Well, our investors were quite taken with you. I don't think there will be any problem getting approval for the project. Awesome. I gotta admit though, I was pretty nervous. And why would that be? Well, I mean, you were there and… Naruto trailed off at the scathing glare from Sasuke. Itachi flicked his eyes toward his brother, then leveled his gaze back at Naruto leaning forward in his chair while folding his hands on the desk. And what has my little brother been telling you about me, Sasuke turned his glare to his brother. Itachi gave him a smirk and a wink. Sasuke wanted to smack that look off his face. Nothing much, really. Naruto looked away. Oh, come now. He slightly lifted his lips into a smile and got up and sat next to Naruto, casually wrapping an arm around him. Sasuke's eyes widened and he came close to choking on the water he was in the process of sipping. You can tell me. Nothing he says affects me in the slightest. I'm just dying to know. Naruto, being the naive sort he is, falls right into Itachi's trap. He says you're called the Ice King? And that you're, well, kinda difficult to please. So I didn't know how you'd take the presentation. By the end Naruto was mumbling. Really? He turned and grinned at his brother who was looking paler by the moment. He loved messing with his little brother. Besides, the blonde looked kind of cute when he was embarrassed. Wait, did he just think someone was cute? Well, he took a longer look at man he was so casually manipulating for his amusement. He definitely was not a bad looker. Tanned, blonde hair, blue eyes, well built. He'd seen lots of males over the years. His friends and family had certainly pushed a number of them on him. But he had never given any of them a second glance. What made this man in front of him so different? Maybe it was his warm personality? His naivete? His smile? Or maybe it was the fact that he was the only person who could deal with his antisocial brother. Sasuke raised a brow. Was Itachi checking Naruto out? He wasn't even trying and his plan seemed to be having some effect. Itachi moved closer to the object of his observations, watching the blush appear on his cheeks. Nice cheekbones too. Well, maybe you shouldn't listen to everything my brother tells you. He whispered, but loud enough for Sasuke to hear from his vantage point. Naruto glanced into the older Uchiha's dark eyes before quickly looking down again. He knew he was blushing. He could feel the heat going straight to his cheeks. If only he could raise his hands to cover them. He shivered slightly when hot air hit his ear. He really wasn't sure what was happening. Why was Itachi so close to him? Was he teasing him? Naruto unconsciously held his breath. Sasuke was watching this partly in glee and partly in horror. He really wasn't sure which was winning out. Is he flirting? He watched Itachi slowly turn his head, observing his reaction out of the corner of his eye. What the hell? He's doing this on purpose. Just to get a rise out of me. He glared back and jumped up, gathering his things. Well, this was nice. But I think it's time we head back to the office and finalize plans. Right, Dobi? Naruto wasn't listening. He was still stuck at the part where Itachi's breathing made his ear tingle. He hadn't even noticed that Itachi had left the couch to return to his desk or that Sasuke was now standing and prepared to leave. A jacket suddenly smacked him in the face. He jumped slightly, grabbing the offending material and glaring at the direction it came from. What the hell, Teme? Let's go. We have things to do. But, now Dobi. Naruto rolled his eyes. What stick got shoved up the Teme's ass? Fine, whatever. He tossed his jacket on and straightened his tie. Then he walked over to Itachi with a blinding smile. It was really nice meeting you, Itachi. Pleasure was all mine. Itachi gave Naruto a slight smile. Maybe we'll meet again sometime. He turned to Sasuke, who was already itching to open the door. Guess I'll be seeing you, little brother. Sasuke gave a quick nod and opened the door. Naruto rolled his eyes and followed after his friend, boss. Before he closed the door though, he peeked back inside. Oh, by the way. Itachi looked up. You're not as bad as the Teme says you are. He grinned and closed the door. Itachi chuckled softly. Yes, Naruto Uzumaki was definitely an interesting one. He needed to learn more about him. He unlocked his computer and went to the internet. At a site only a select few in the company have been given access to, he began to type. Naruto Uzumaki. Sasuke sat in his home office brooding. He glared at the papers in front of him with such ferocity they should have burned to ashes under his gaze. His brother was such a bastard. He always found some kind of way to piss him off. And how dare he use his best friend to do it? But there were sparks, he was sure of it. Even if his brother was just messing with his head, he could see Itachi was interested in Naruto. Itachi doesn't allow his friends to touch him, hardly allows the privilege to his family, yet this time he not only allowed it, but initiated it. If that doesn't scream interested, he didn't know what would. And Naruto, if he blushed anymore he'd have been a cherry. The problem with him though is that he's so freaking naive, he probably hadn't even figured out that Itachi was, in a roundabout way, flirting with him. But now he had a new predicament. How could he get the two soon-to-be lovebirds together again? Naruto and he were on the opposite side of town from Itachi. Usually the only time he and Itachi were in each other's presence was at his parents' home, and Naruto had never been there. As it is, he and his brother tried to avoid going there as much as possible. All either of them ever heard from their parents were their wishes for weddings and heirs. He loved them, but it was too much of an annoyance, so unless it was an ultimatum, they both stayed away as much as possible. There was always the job, but how to get the two to meet up without being obvious and having them figure out his motives was a dilemma he hadn't figured a way around yet. What to do? What to do? The door opened and in walked his wife. The ex-Hyuga was quite stunning. Women would kill for a figure like hers. Her long violet hair reached down her lower back. She liked to keep it up most of the time since it got in her way. But when she was at home, she would let it down because she knew Sasuke liked to run his fingers through it. Her most beautiful feature, though, was her eyes. They were a very rare lavender color. Even contact lenses couldn't duplicate the hue. Sasuke thanked his lucky stars a million times over for making her his. He sometimes wondered if, out of everyone, he got the sweetest end of that particular business deal. She stood in front of him and smiled serenely as she rubbed her finger over the crease in his forehead. Sasuke dear, quit brooding. You'll get wrinkles. Sasuke relaxed slightly at his wife's joking manner. Sorry Hinata, I have a lot on my mind. She moved behind him and started massaging his shoulders. Want to talk about it? It's Itachi. Isn't it always about him? She giggled. Sasuke grabbed her hand and pulled her lightly so she fell in his lap. It's different this time, smart Alec. He wrapped his arms around her tiny waist and sighed. Hinata could always make him less moody. She and the Dobi were the only two who could get through the blank mask he wore and make him open up and relax. I'm trying to hook him up. Oh please don't tell me you're turning into your mother and father. He poked her in a ticklish side, causing her musical laugh to ring out. Not even. I just think he needs someone in his life. I'm hoping it will make him much less of an ass. I already have someone I think would be perfect for him, but I can't have either of them figuring out what I'm doing. So you need a plan. He nodded. Well then, Hinata Uchiha at your service. She grinned and did a semi-bow in Sasuke's lap. People always say it's the quiet ones you have to watch. Hinata is one of those quiet ones. It was late and yet Itachi was still in the office. All of his employees had left hours ago. He should just spend the night. It really would be too much trouble to bother going home this late and he still had that extra change of clothes in the closet. He sat back in his seat, reclining a bit and turned away from his computer screen to face the city lights. And as he looked out at the night sky and the bright lights, his thoughts continued to revolve around him. Naruto Uzumaki, Namikaze. Birth date: October 10, 1982. Birthplace: Konoha, Japan. Father: Minato Namikaze. Mother: Kushina Uzumaki, both deceased. Current guardian: Iruka Amino. Occupation: schoolteacher. Previous guardian: Jiraiya and Tsunade Senju. Grandparents, see footnote. Footnote. Tokyo newspaper: Namikaze heir broke. Jiraiya and Tsunade Senju, grandparents of Namikaze heir Naruto Uzumaki, gambled, drank, and traveled away the savings that was willed to the son of businessman, Minato Namikaze. Naruto, who is now age 2, has been legally adopted by schoolteacher Iruka Amino. Itachi continued to stare out his floor-to-ceiling windows. He faintly remembered Minato Namikaze. He and his father had been friends. That much he could recall. Going back in his childhood memories, he visualized a man with blonde hair who always had a smile on his face. He remembered being introduced to him and his red-headed wife when he was quite young. At the time he wondered how they ended up with such weird colored hair since everyone else he knew had black hair. The two were always present at his parents' parties. He would try to sneak in to see the events, but he was always caught and ushered up to his wing so as not to disturb the guests. He never remembered them having a son though. Of course, now that he could link the two, Naruto was basically the spitting image of his father. Being so young, he didn't think much of it when he didn't see the two anymore. Now he understood why, but why did it matter so much to him? It wasn't like he should care. Naruto Uzumaki was just another business associate. So what if Sasuke and the blonde were practically joined at the hip? He didn't mean anything to him. He was just toying with him to make Sasuke squirm, right? He didn't care about that bright smile, or those beautiful, expressive blue orbs, or that tanned skin, or the cute blush that overtook his face when he got so close. Gah! Itachi jumped up looking uncharacteristically troubled. He grabbed a jacket and walked out of his office. He needed a walk, badly. How about a dare? Hinata, having now heard the entire story, had taken on the impossible mission as her own and was suggesting every idea she could think of to get the two males together. Wouldn't work. Itachi would refuse. Though sadly, that would probably work on me. You could always just knock Naruto out, gift wrap him with red ribbons and a big bow, and give him to Itachi as a birthday present. Sasuke couldn't help laughing out loud at the vision that presented to his overworked brain. You are a devil, my love. Hinata grinned and shrugged. I know. The discussion had moved from the office to the bedroom. Sasuke was already lying down and Hinata had just come from the dressing room clothed in a short lavender nightgown that hugged her in just the right places. Sasuke's eyes roamed over her figure and he decided it was time to forget about the dobi for now. Oh, I've got it. He was hardly paying attention anymore. She got in bed and turned to her husband, propping her head in her hand. We take them clubbing. And why would we do that? Sasuke murmured while his fingers reached out to glide slowly up her side. Because if what you say is true, Naruto has definitely caught Itachi's eye, even if he doesn't understand it yet. If you and I invite Naruto, he can probably get Itachi to go. And if I bring my cousin into the mix. Wait, what does Neji have to do with this? Now his fingers slid under her gown and started stroking her flat stomach. Neji will have everything to do with this. Hinata had a smirk that rivaled Sasuke's at the moment. We need to make your brother want Naruto. All we have to do is use Neji to make him jealous. There's one big problem with this little plan you're hatching, my dear. Hinata raised a brow in question. His fingers slid upwards, deliberately brushing against her breasts, making her moan. Itachi doesn't get jealous. He will when he sees my hot cousin taking up all of Naruto's attention and hitting on him all night long. Hinata refused to be the only one being teased and slid her knee up between his legs. Sasuke gasped when her knee came in contact with a very sensitive spot. I'll believe it when I see it. Sasuke grew tired of talking and wrapped an arm around his wife, pulling her closer to nibble and suck on her delicate neck. Hinata closed her eyes with a moan and slid her fingers down his back, getting in one last thing before surrendering to her husband's attentions. Tomorrow night, 9 p.m. at Amaterasu. Fine. Sasuke was sitting in Naruto's office, on the couch, tapping his fingers on the wooden armrest. The dobi was late, again. He really needed to impress upon his friend the importance of setting an example for the rest of the office. At that moment he saw the elevator open and out walked the dobi, bobbing his head to his iPod. He saw Ino walk past the blonde giggling at the way he danced toward his office door. He sang slightly off key, making Sasuke cringe. Naruto walked through his door and closed it halfway in order to hang his jacket on the hook when he suddenly jumped about a foot in the air upon seeing his couch occupied. Geez Teme, you scared the mess out of me. Sasuke deliberately looked down at his watch then looked back up. Well, maybe you should get to work on time then. Naruto rolled his eyes. Whatever Teme. Why are you here anyway? Hinata and I are going to Amaterasu tonight. We want you to come with us. Naruto looked confused for a second. But you're married. Why would you want to go there? Sasuke glared at his friend in mock anger. If he wasn't focused so intently on the plan, he'd take the time to be more offended. What are you trying to say? Are you suggesting that the only people who go clubbing are single people? Geez Naruto, why don't you just call me an old man next? Naruto sat down at his desk and turned on his computer, tossing junk mail aside with the flick of his wrist. Okay, fine, sorry. Look, I'd go, but I don't want to be a third wheel. It won't be any fun if I don't have anyone to go with. Just ask a friend. It doesn't have to be a date or anything. Sasuke went silent and pretended to be thinking. In fact, here's an idea. Why don't you ask Itachi? Itachi? This time the blonde raised an eyebrow. He wondered what brought on such a strange suggestion. They weren't even really friends. They had only met yesterday. Yeah, you and he seemed to get along well enough yesterday. Sasuke saw the weird look the Dobi was giving him and decided to play the sympathy card. He knew someone as kind as Naruto wouldn't be able to resist wanting to help someone. Besides, he never goes anywhere. He stays holed up in that office of his at all times of the day and night. He really needs to get out more and meet people. But he refuses to go with me whenever I ask him. Maybe if you ask, he'll come. Naruto thought back to yesterday. He and Itachi did get along well enough. Well, there was that other thing. Okay, so not going there. He sighed and ran a hand through his unruly locks and looked up at his best friend. He hoped he knew what he was getting into. Okay fine, I'll go. And I'll ask him to come with me. Score. Great. You can dress at our place. You're not going to let me wear any of my own clothes, are you? Naruto asked with a pout. Not a chance in hell. Sakura was on her lunch break and since she was dieting again, she didn't get anything to eat. Instead she sat at her desk using IM to chat with her friend Ino. It was surprising, but neither had any idea that both worked for the same company, just at different branches. In progress. Pretty in pink. So you're still not seeing anyone? Flower girl. Well, there's my boss. He's so freaking hot. Pretty in pink. OMG Ino. Seriously? You're going out with your boss? Flower girl. Well, no not exactly. I'm wearing him down. Soon enough, he'll come to me. Pretty in pink. That's so cool. I wish I could date my boss. He's seriously hot, but I doubt he notices I'm here unless he needs something done. Flower girl. Hey, I bet my boss is hotter than yours. Pretty in pink. Not a chance Ino pig. My boss is way hotter. Flower girl. You wish forehead girl. Besides my boss is an exec VP. Pretty in pink. That's nothing. Mine is president. See mine's better. Naya. Cheeky smiley face. Flower girl. Yeah whatever. Flower girl. Well anyway, it's been forever. We gotta do something soon. Pretty in pink. Totally. Too bad you don't work near me. Well, I better go before my boss catches me on here. Later. Flower girl. Bye. The phone rang right after Sakura signed off. Good afternoon Itachi Uchiha's office. Sakura? Hi, it's Naruto. Oh, hello Naruto, how are you? I'm great. Is Itachi in the office? Yes he is. Actually he just got through holding a meeting with the investors. Hold on a moment okay? You bet. Itachi had just seen the last investor out and was about to close the door. Mr. Uchiha, you have a phone call. Who is it? He said, not really caring at the moment. It's Naruto Uzumaki. Would you like me to take a message? He had already formed the words, take a message, on his lips when it registered what she said. He paused in the doorway with his hand on the knob. No, I will take this call. Okay, he's on line 2. Itachi closed the door and went to his desk and punched the correct line. Hello Naruto. Itachi, hi. How are you? On his end, Naruto had smacked himself on the forehead. He was stuttering like a schoolgirl with a crush. Very well. In fact, your project seems to be a go. The three of us will have to get together and deal with the contract side of things. Really? That's awesome. Yes, but I have a feeling that is not the reason you called. Well no. Actually, the thing is, Sasuke invited me to go with him and his wife to Amaterasu tonight. And I refused to be a third wheel, so I thought I'd invite you. I don't really do that sort of thing. So I hear. Of course, I also hear you spend way too much time holed up in your office. You should get out once in a while, you know. You're starting to sound like my friends. Well that's a step up. I started as a business associate. Now I'm a friend. I'm moving up in the world. Itachi could practically visualize the grin on the blonde after that statement. He shook his head in disbelief that he was actually thinking of taking the guy up on the offer. He could care less about going to the club. But it would give him a chance to get to know more about this enigma known as Naruto Uzumaki. Okay, fine, I'll go, but only because you asked. If it was Sasuke, I wouldn't be having this conversation. Great, so I'll meet you at 9? Naruto took that as a yes. Alright then, see you tonight. They both hung up, and both of them let out a breath they hadn't known they were holding. Hinata had taken it upon herself to do something about the god-awful creation known as Naruto's hair. Hold still. My goodness, when was the last time you combed through this mess? Actually, on second thought, never mind. I don't think I want to know. Naruto was already dressed, again, courtesy of Hinata. As soon as Naruto had given Sasuke an affirmative, he had called his wife, gave her Naruto's sizes, and told her to go shopping. Sasuke leaned against the door and watched his wife work her magic. Hinata had outdone herself this time. She had taken Naruto and transformed him into someone much hotter and wire. He was wearing a cotton shirt the exact color of his eyes. It was a size too small and fit him like a glove, showing off the toned body no one ever got to see. The dark blue jeans she bought him were just a touch baggy, which went nicely with the tight shirt. The best though had to be the button-down black leather jacket. It fit Naruto perfectly. She finished him off with a pair of black Timberlands. Hell, if Naruto looked like that all the time, he'd turn any straight guy gay. He looked that good. Itachi definitely had his work cut out for him tonight. And he couldn't wait. There, done. Hinata patted Naruto's shoulder with a smile and stepped back to let the men admire her handiwork. Sasuke nodded in approval. Naruto looked in the mirror and grinned. His hair still retained its trademark spikes, but with a bit more control to it. Wow, this is great, Hinata. You should fix my hair all the time. Sorry, after all that work, next time I do your hair, you'll have to pay me. Ah, too bad. He got out the chair and gave Hinata a big bear hug. Thanks, Hinata. Hey, watch it with my wife. Sasuke said jokingly. Man, you're so lucky. I'd love to have a wife like this. Are you sure about that, Dobi? Hinata elbowed her husband, making him grimace just a bit. Naruto tilted his head to the side in confusion. Huh? What do you mean? Sasuke smirked at his clueless friend. Nothing, just messing with you. Itachi stood outside the club. He was not happy. He told one person. That he was going to Amaterasu, and somehow all of his demented friends heard and decided to show up. So, I hear the person you're waiting on is quite the hottie. Itachi's glare turned deadly. That was Kisame. How they were friends, he didn't know. If there was anyone who was an exact opposite of himself, it was Kisame. He was loud, brash, uncouth, and had the worst wardrobe he'd ever seen. But somehow, they remained friends. Itachi glanced behind him at his so-called friends and decided he was better off ignoring the running commentary going on, courtesy of Kisame, Hidan and Deidara. Hidan was probably the closest to him in sense of style. But then he opened his mouth and all went to hell. He whined about everything like nobody's business. Deidara kept bouncing up and down. He was the hyper one of the group. His long blonde hair had made people mistake him for a girl many times. He had a skewed sense of style, but it worked on him. Maybe because he was an artist. The others were not so bad. Sasori pretty much stayed to himself unless addressed by someone. Kakuzu was a loner and didn't talk much unless it was about getting some money. Pain and Konan were a couple and pretty much kept to themselves most of the time. Right now the three behind him were taking guesses on who the mystery person would be and what they would look like. Stupid meddling friends. Finally he saw Sasuke's car pull up. Thank God. First out was Hinata, who looked beautiful, as usual, in a purple and silver spaghetti strap dress that stopped right above the knee. Next out was Sasuke, dressed in a blue silk shirt and black slacks. He passed the key to the valet and walked over to link his arm with his wife's. And last, but not least, came Naruto. Itachi just stared. It would have been embarrassing if he'd cared to notice. The rest of his gang, though, had no problem expressing their opinion of the blonde. Catcalls, whistles and other words of praise abounded from them, causing the object of their noise to blush. Itachi was so enthralled he didn't notice the hot blonde stop in front of him until he spoke. Hello, Itachi. Itachi blinked and looked down. Naruto. He replied, reasserting himself quickly. He nodded toward his brother and his wife. Hinata, you're looking wonderful. While Itachi was complimenting Hinata, Naruto was checking out Itachi. He was in a red silk shirt and black slacks and had a black jacket tossed over his shoulder. He was hot, there was no other way to describe him. Naruto had never once questioned his duality. But the way his mind and body were reacting to the man in front of him made him begin to wonder. Thank you, Itachi. You're looking good yourself. Now that the preliminaries were out of the way. Hey, don't we get an introduction? Hidan whined. Yeah Itachi, we'd like to meet your new friend. Kisame grinned at his friend. Naruto, these are some of my so-called friends who decided they needed to accompany me so as to observe me in a non-work environment. Itachi said dryly as he rolled his eyes and gestured to the group and named them one by one. Now we should get inside. Actually, we're waiting on one more person. Hinata piped up. And at that moment, a sleek black Mercedes SL 600 pulled up and a tall male with long dark hair got out and walked toward the group tossing his keys to the valet. He had on all black, except for the cream-colored jacket he wore over it. Neji. Hinata squealed and hugged her cousin. You're looking well cousin, Neji said with a smile. Hello Sasuke, Itachi. Sasuke and Itachi both nodded. Hinata pulled Neji over to stand in front of Naruto. Neji, this is the friend of Sasuke's I wanted you to meet. Naruto. Neji, Naruto. Nice to meet you. The two shook hands. Naruto looked him over thinking how it could be possible to be surrounded by so many handsome men. Likewise, Neji deliberately hooked his arm around Naruto's, guiding him toward the entrance. So tell me a bit about yourself. Itachi watched the two walk toward the entrance and found himself glaring at the Hyuga. He wanted time with the blonde. Hell, Naruto was the one who asked him to go. Sasuke saw the glare and winked at his wife. Hinata's plan just might work. The significantly larger group than planned made their way through the loud club to the back stairs and up to the VIP room. Fortunately, the music pulsed at regular decibels instead of the blow-your-ears-out volume it was at downstairs. The walls were painted a blood red while the ceiling was white and black leather furniture with white trim was situated around the outer edges of the room. The large black marble dance floor took up the rest of the space. There was a bar, complete with personal bartender toward the far end of the room, which all of Itachi's friends made a beeline towards. Itachi took a seat in one of the chairs. Sasuke and Hinata took the love seat. Neji pulled Naruto over to a small table and they sat across from each other, deep in conversation. The rest of the group, one by one, sprawled out wherever there was an empty seat. Itachi watched the dark Hyuga like a hawk. What could they be talking about? He heard Naruto laugh at something Neji said and he almost gave in to his need to growl. It was irritating him to no end that Neji was taking away his time with Naruto. He was so busy staring, he hadn't even noticed Kisame sit next to him and pass him a drink. Yo, Itachi? His eyes slowly diverted from the couple and slid toward Kisame. You gonna let him steal the blonde like that? He's not stealing anything. Naruto isn't mine or anyone else's property. Then why are you glaring at him like you want to kill him? Indeed, why am I? Itachi wondered to himself. Naruto could spend his time with whomever he wanted. So why should he be bothered by it? He sighed and sipped his drink, still keeping an eye on the duo at the table. He didn't bother to answer the question, for Kisame or for himself. He wasn't all that sure he wanted to know the answer. Sasuke and Hinata were being well entertained by the older brother's uncharacteristic antics. Itachi's pissed. Sasuke whispered in Hinata's ear. MMHM. Just like I predicted. Hinata smiled knowingly. He's glaring daggers at your cousin. Hinata giggled. So I noticed. He can handle it though. He's tough. Neji looked over at the whispering husband and wife. His scheming cousin had already informed him beforehand of what the two were attempting to do. He thought they were both crazy for even thinking Itachi would notice or even be concerned about what he did with Naruto. But it seems they were onto something. The self-proclaimed Ice King was practically glaring ice needles at him. It was quite amusing to see the usually stoic Uchiha reacting so negatively to him being around the blonde. Actually, he was having a good time. Naruto was fun to talk with and if he wasn't already in a relationship, he might have considered him. His uncle would kill him though if he brought home a guy. As it was, it took some convincing for Ten to let him go to the club. She threatened to use pointy weapons on him if she found out he screwed up at all. He flicked his eyes over to the couch and then back to Naruto. Oh yes, Itachi definitely looked ready to kill him. Looks like it was time for the next part of the plan to be put into play. So Naruto, you dance? Of course. Well, come on then. He got up and Naruto followed him to the dance floor which was already occupied by Hidan and Deidara. Deidara jumped around and had absolutely no rhythm whatsoever, but he didn't seem to care. "Hey Naruto, come join us," he yelled happily. "Yeah, the more the merrier," Hidan added. Naruto and Neji made it to the center of the floor where they began moving to the beat. Arms and hips swayed. In Deidara's case, arms and legs moved with less rhythm and more enthusiasm. Hinata pulled Sasuke onto the floor and they moved together in perfect symmetry. Itachi watched Neji's hands moving down to Naruto's waist and he was suddenly hit with the urge to break something. Preferably Neji's hands. Kisame smirked at his clueless friend and winked over at Sasuke, who gave him a nod. Yep, they were all in it together. Kisame thought of it as payback for all the dates he and the rest had set up over the years that Itachi refused. The song ended and another took its place. And the group of dancers got larger. Kisame left his brooding friend behind and joined the party. Even Pain and Conan found a little corner to dance in since he wouldn't allow her to dance with anyone else. And Deidara had grabbed Sasori, refusing to take no for an answer, and had him dancing. Kakuzu had even found some girl downstairs that interested him and he brought her up to the VIP section and started dancing with her. The only one not out there was one Itachi Uchiha. A half an hour or so later, different ones were taking breaks. Sasuke bowed out and Hinata grabbed Neji to dance with her. Sasori had practically ran from the dance floor, and from Deidara's flaying arms, as soon as humanly possible. Naruto sat down next to Itachi, breathing hard, and grabbed the glass from his pale fingers, downing the leftovers in one swallow. Itachi gave him a half-hearted glare. He was unable to be all that mad after seeing the grin light up the blonde's face. "You seem to be having fun." "Yeah, I am. You know, you'd have more fun too if you get up and dance with me." Itachi raised an eyebrow at that. "Don't give me that raised eyebrow thing. Sasuke does that all the time. I'm immune. Come on, please." He was reminded of their meeting when Naruto had begged Sasuke for ramen. He understood now why Sasuke caved so easily. A tanned hand raised into Itachi's sightline. His eyes roamed up the hand and arm and up to the smiling face of Naruto. Except he could read his eyes and he saw how nervous he was. The blonde was worried he'd reject him. Decision made, Itachi grabbed the tan hand in his and got up, pulling the blonde to an empty place on the dance floor. A slow pounding beat began and both of them started to move. The two seemed to move together as one. Naruto's arms moved into the air while Itachi's hands moved to his hips, pulling him closer until they were just an inch away from grinding together. Neji chuckled at the triumphant grin Hinata was sporting. "Well cousin, I don't think you will need my services anymore tonight." "No, I don't think so." She gave her oh so helpful cousin a smile. "Say hello to 1010 for me." "Sure thing." He kissed her on the cheek, nodded toward his brother-in-law and silently left. The two dancers didn't even notice. They also didn't notice when Kisame took out his camera phone and started snapping pictures like crazy. The elevator opened at the top floor and out stepped Sasuke with a newspaper under his arm. He had a spring in his step one normally didn't see. He noticed Sakura was already working even though it was still early. "Good morning, Mr. Uchiha. Is he in yet?" "Yes, he is." She reached to call her boss from the intercom, but Sasuke intercepted her hand. "Don't worry about it. I'll just surprise him." "Oh, Sakura blushed at the touch. She wasn't sure what to say. Well, it was his brother after all, so she guessed it would be okay. "Okay." Sasuke opened the door, hoping to shock his brother. "No can do though." Itachi looked up and crossed his arms, leaning back in his chair. "What brings you here so early, little brother?" "I was just wondering if you had seen the news this morning." Itachi looked wary for a moment. "No, why?" Sasuke dropped the morning paper on his brother's desk, showing the front page of the local news section. And Itachi stared. For a while there he didn't even blink. Then he looked up at Sasuke. Then looked back down. Then back up, this time with a narrow-eyed glare. "What did you do?" "What?" Sasuke played innocent. "I didn't have anything to do with this. Right, and I just happened to be at a certain club last night. And some random person just happened to get a picture of me with Naruto in the VIP section that hardly anyone, besides our group, was allowed into. And this random someone somehow had enough influence to get it published in the newspaper overnight." The glare turned fiery and Sasuke wanted to shrink back. He held his ground though. "I had nothing to do with it. I just saw it in the paper and thought you should know." Itachi looked down at the picture again. "Gotta admit though, it is a great picture." As soon as his brother left, he would be cutting that out and keeping it as a souvenir. He knew though, his idiot brother had something to do with this mess. He would get him back soon enough. But right now, he had to do damage control. If by some chance his parents found out. Mr. Uchiha? Yes, Sakura. Your mother is on the phone. He was doomed. Itachi sighed and glared at his brother. He wanted to wipe that innocent look off his face, damn him. He hit the button for his speakerphone. Hello mother. Itachi dear. It's been a while since I've heard your voice. Yes, well, I've been busy. Is there a reason you're calling? Actually, yes. The craziest thing happened this morning. You see, your father was reading the newspaper and as I walked past him I happened to look down at the page he was reading and do you know what I saw? Itachi was swiftly developing a headache. No mother, what did you see? I saw a picture of you dancing with a very handsome young man. Sasuke twitched slightly trying to keep a straight face. Really? Handsome? His face isn't even clearly seen in the picture. Yes. Is this mystery man your boyfriend? The usually unflappable Ice King choked. Sasuke bit his lip, so hard it bled, to keep from laughing. Excuse me? Oh come on honey. Don't be shy. Is this the reason why you would refuse all the dates your father and I continually set up for you? Itachi sighed and shook his head. No mother. And he's not. Your father and I want to meet him. Mother. He tried, but once Makoto Uchiha got started, it was impossible to stop her. Sasuke was now holding his breath and wrapping his arm around his stomach. It hurt so much from trying to hold back the laughter. Itachi glared at him, but it had no effect. You must bring him to dinner Friday night. God no. But mother no buts Itachi. I hardly ever see either of my sons. I want you both here with your boyfriend on Friday for dinner. I won't take no for an answer. Yep, there was no stopping her. It was now Sasuke's turn to choke, not from laughter, but because of his mother's including him in the forced invitation. I'll call Hinata and let her know. We'll have the whole family. It'll be so nice. Both males looked like they were being threatened with execution. Sasuke was shaking his head and mouthing, no, at Itachi. He didn't want a family dinner. No need to call Hinata, mother. Sasuke's right here. Itachi replied with an evil grin in his little brother's direction. He ignored the almost identical evil glare that came back his way. Oh good. Sasuke dear? Why didn't you say something? How are you sweetheart? This time it was Sasuke's turn to close his eyes. Sweetheart? How old am I? 12? I'm just great mother. There was hint of sarcasm in his voice, but she didn't detect it. That's good dear. So you heard about dinner? Unfortunately yes. Yes I did. Good. Don't forget to tell Hinata. Yes mother. So have you seen the picture yet? Sasuke looked at Itachi with a smirk. Oh yes. The two look just so handsome together. I'm sure his boyfriend will be happy to come to dinner on Friday. Itachi was itching to grab his brother by the neck and strangle him. Wonderful. See you both in a couple of days. Goodbye mother. Both of them chorused. Itachi pushed the button to hang up, never taking his eyes off of Sasuke's smirking face. I'm warning you little brother. As of yet, I don't know when. I don't know how, but I am going to make your life miserable. I would kill you, but I would never hear the end of it. Sasuke stood up still grinning, walking towards the door. Oh, I know you will. But until then, I'm going to thoroughly enjoy this. Oh, by the way, the real reason I came was to let you know that Naruto and I drew up a draft of the contract. We need to meet with you and go through all the particulars before we do a final version and pass it on to all parties. Ah yes, business. He could live with business. When? How about tomorrow around 6 at your place? I'll bring dinner. That'll do. Now go away before I act on my urge to kill you. Sasuke smirked and opened the door. Have a good day Itachi. He closed the door and leaned back against it for a moment to let loose a chuckle. Sakura looked at him wondering what was so humorous, but she was too timid to ask. He turned and slightly smiled at Sakura and walked away with a wave. Sakura watched him walk away with stars in her eyes. Sasuke had just gained a new fangirl. After driving across town, Sasuke walked into his building at 9:30. He ran into Naruto at the elevators. He glared at his friend on the ride up, at least until the last passenger got off. As soon as the doors closed again and the elevator moved up to the top floor, he yanked the earpieces from Naruto's ears. Don't tell me you're just getting here. Naruto looked sheepish and fiddled with his dangling earpieces. Fine, I won't tell you then. Dobi, the Uchiha growled. Okay, I'll be on time from now on. Sasuke looked disbelieving. Seriously, promise. Naruto drew an X, with his finger over his heart looking as honest as possible. Sasuke couldn't help shaking his head and smiling at his crazy partner. The elevator got to their floor and they both got off. Sasuke innocently pulled another newspaper. Yes, he bought more than one. 3 to be exact. So, seen the paper Dobi? Huh? Sasuke passed him a paper. Check the local section. Naruto flipped through until he reached the right section. He stopped in the middle of the hallway, his mouth in the shape of an O. The blush started at his ears and slowly flushed over his entire face and down his neck. Sasuke leaned over and whispered in his ear. See something you like, Dobi? Naruto jumped and squeaked, going a new shade of red before pointing his finger at Sasuke. Teme! He yelled and ran into his office, shutting the door. Sasuke chuckled and continued onto his office. Hidden in his office, Naruto stared at the picture again. Damn that Uchiha for looking so good. He thought back to the night before. They were dancing so close and it was warm and those long fingers burned into his hips despite the material separating the fingers from his skin. They moved in sync and he remembered practically grinding against him. Gah! Naruto groaned and banged his forehead against his desk. His imagination was taking him to places he really didn't need to go. He felt a stirring in his lower regions and suddenly he came to a startling and very uncomfortable conclusion. He was attracted to Itachi Uchiha. Yes, Itachi Uchiha, the Ice King, Sasuke's brother. Itachi, a male. What the hell? The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello, Kisame. Itachi. What's up, man? What's up is there's a picture in the newspaper of myself and a certain blonde in a certain club that we were at last night. Really? I gotta see that. How many, Kisame? Huh? Don't toy with me, Kisame. How many pictures did you take? What are you talking about? I didn't bring a camera with me last night. So I could look at your cell phone right now and not find any pictures of any of us from the club last night? Of course not. You think so low of me, my friend. Kisame grinned at the phone. He had already uploaded all the pictures to his computer and deleted them from the phone. You know, Kisame, if I found out you had anything to do with this, I'll find the biggest knife I own and gut you like a fish. Ouch, man. That's harsh. Goodbye, Kisame. Itachi hung up the phone and then rubbed his temples. His headache was getting worse. Sasuke and Kisame, he knew the two had to be working together. Kisame was always snapping pictures. And Sasuke had enough influence to get photos published in such a short period of time. And Naruto, why couldn't he get the vision of the blonde dancing with him out of his head? He growled and went to the medicine cabinet in his personal restroom and swallowed 2 extra-strength Tylenol with a glass of water. He changed his mind. He was going to kill Sasuke and Kisame. Sasuke knocked on the door of Naruto's office and let himself in. Naruto looked up and glared at his friend. If you're just here to make fun of me, you can leave, Teme. The younger Uchiha almost felt sorry for his friend. Almost. He sat across from the distressed blonde and poked him in the forehead. What are you so upset about? It's a good picture actually. Yeah, it is nice, isn't it? I had a lot of fun. Naruto replied somewhat wistfully. Yeah, me too. Now, time to tease him all over again. So, business, yes? Naruto looked up at him expectantly. We're going to Itachi's tomorrow night at 6 to go over the draft. Naruto's eyes widened. He had all kinds of worrying thoughts spinning through his head. And none of it was about the contract. How do I face him? Will he be mad? Oh my god, he can't know I'm attracted to him. Sasuke watched a myriad of emotions go through those blue eyes. Who knew a tanned person could turn so pale? He could practically see and hear the wheels turning in the Dobi's head. And now to bring the hammer down. He thought with a smirk. And Friday, my parents are having a family dinner. They want to meet you. Naruto paled even further. What? Why? Sasuke shrugged. They saw the picture. They want to meet the man who actually got Itachi to do something as normal as dance. He thought he saw fear in the blonde's eyes. He decided not to mention the minor details, like the fact that his mother thought Naruto was Itachi's boyfriend. My god, he was evil. Well, I guess I should let you get back to work. Uh-huh. Naruto nodded without really paying much attention. He was on information overload. He didn't even notice Sasuke leave the room. Hinata, I think I broke him. She laughed at her worried husband. Sasuke was sitting on a bar stool, chin in hand, mulling over the day while watching his wife cook dinner. Nonsense, he's probably just shocked. I mean, it's not every day you find out you're attracted to another man. I know it's shocking, but I honestly feel kind of bad. He looked scared to death at the prospect of meeting my folks. Hinata stopped stirring to turn to her husband with a hand on her hip. Sasuke, anyone would be afraid of meeting your folks. I mean, seriously, your family's scarier than just about anyone. And that's coming from a Hyuga. Sasuke sighed and brushed his hair away from his face. Things were getting much more complicated. He knew Itachi could handle his crazy schemes. But Naruto, he was in the middle of something he didn't know anything about. He didn't want things to go too far and hurt his friend in the process. Hinata could sense Sasuke's uncertainty and walked over to him and placing her smaller hand on top of his. Sasuke, you can just end it if you want. For a moment, he seriously thought about it. But then he remembered the look in the blue eyes when he first saw the picture with Itachi. It wasn't shock, or awe, or anything resembling annoyance. It was a sort of happiness he'd never seen from the blonde before. He knew his friend was pretty much all alone, his guardian notwithstanding. He had a few friends, but most of them didn't live near him. And he didn't think Naruto had ever been in a relationship with anyone. He'd secretly seen the longing in his best friend's eyes whenever he saw another couple. Then he recalled Itachi showing shades of jealousy the entire night while Neji was with Naruto. His brother had always been more of a loner. He knew his father had put a lot pressure on him to take on the family business. And Itachi well exceeded anyone's expectations. But the man had no life outside of work. He needed one, and he really believed Naruto to be the man who could give him one. He couldn't stop now, not when he was so close to seeing success in his self-proclaimed mission. If he really wanted to rationalize it, he could say it was for their own good. Both would thank him in the end, even if they did hate him for a while. No, not yet. It'll be okay. Hinata nodded with a smile and placed his dinner in front of him. Then she sat next to him with her own onigiri, grilled pork topped with tomato sauce and vegetables. So, what about tomorrow night? It's just business. A devilish grin lit her face. It doesn't have to be all business, you know. You really should tease Itachi a bit. It's the perfect opportunity to see what's going on in his head. I don't know if it's possible to see what's going on in my brother's head. A dropped pencil here, a bend there. Sasuke raised a brow. You're enjoying this more than I am. Hinata laughed. Maybe. No maybes about it, love. You're more evil than I am. You wound me dear, right here. She pointed to her heart. Che, right. I'm onto you, Hinata Uchiha. I thought you were such an angel when I married you, only for you to turn out to be the devil in disguise. Sasuke laughed as he dodged a thrown piece of tomato. Itachi sat on his couch, typing away on his laptop, waiting for his brother and his friend to show up. He felt strange. It wasn't often he actually sat in his own living room. Most of the time, he came home from work late with some kind of takeout, ate it in the kitchen, then went to his bedroom to read a bit before going to bed. The knock on his door came at 6:15. He opened the door and immediately glared at the two males. You're late. Sasuke and Naruto both pointed at each other. Itachi rolled his eyes and gestured for them to come in. The younger Uchiha passed a large bag to the older one. Itachi nodded and walked to the kitchen. Naruto looked around noticing that, despite the expensive taste in furniture, the place was mostly bare. Hey Itachi? You don't spend much time here, do you? Not really. Itachi replied from the kitchen. Sasuke took a seat on the couch and opened his briefcase. Naruto took out his laptop and plugged it in, seating himself on the floor. He shrugged out of his jacket and pulled off his tie, tossing them both in an empty chair and then unbuttoned his shirt leaving it open showing a white t-shirt. Sasuke just took off his jacket. Itachi walked back in with plates and glasses then brought out the cartons of food and a bottle of sake. Neither had noticed until now, but it was the first time for Naruto, and the first time in a long time for Sasuke, that they had seen Itachi so casual. His hair was still tied back in his trademark style, but he was dressed down in black sweats and a plain black t-shirt. His feet were bare, which Naruto kept staring at in envy, since he kind of hated showing his crummy feet. It was strange to see Itachi looking so normal. Observing the usually cold and detached male so relaxed in his natural element made Naruto realize that there was another layer to Itachi. And he wanted to find out more about him. He also felt the need to pull that tie out of his hair and run his fingers through the long strands of black. He fought back his nervousness at being in the same room as the man he found himself attracted to. But once the food was in his possession, He quickly forgot about being nervous and started eating. Between bites, Sasuke passed Itachi a copy of the contract and Naruto opened the file on his laptop. Itachi slowly read through every single word of the contract, examining the wording, clarity, and any possible loopholes while sipping on his sake. "Who wrote this?" Itachi asked suddenly. "Mostly Naruto. I just changed a few things here and there." Sasuke smirked at Naruto, who had looked up nervously at the mentioning of his name. Ah. Both young men waited for Itachi to elaborate. Impressive. He glanced at Naruto. "I see why Sasuke values you so much." He gave him a slight smile. Naruto smiled back. Itachi turned back to the document, this time reading through it with a more critical eye, using a pen to make changes. When he was finished, he passed the document back to his brother. Sasuke took a pen in his fingers, slowly twirling it subconsciously as he read the changes. Suddenly, Hinata's voice flitted through his head and he smirked before dropping the pen on the floor, making sure it rolled under the couch. He groaned and bent over without leaving the couch, half-heartedly searching under it for his pen. He looked up at Naruto sitting on the floor across from him. "Hey Dobi. Can you see my pen under here?" Naruto innocently got on his hands and knees and crawled closer so he could see under the couch. "Move your feet. I think I see it." Sasuke put his feet on the couch while Naruto leaned on his elbows to look under the couch, leaving his backside in the air, right in view of a certain Uchiha. Out of the corner of his eye, Sasuke could see Itachi staring. He didn't know it, but his older brother had started staring as soon as Naruto started crawling across the floor. Itachi tried to look away, but the view was too tempting and his wayward eyes kept finding their way back to that cute backside. Unbidden thoughts of what he could do to that tight ass flew through his head. It took every bit of self-control he possessed to keep blood from gushing out of his nose. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, his breath came out in a whoosh. Naruto, intent on getting to the just-out-of-reach pen, had stretched his hand out under the couch. And as his arm moved back and forth, his backside wiggled with it. Itachi jumped up and with a mumbled, "Be right back," he removed himself from the room. Sasuke practically burst out laughing. Oh God, the look on Itachi's face was priceless. Naruto finally sat up, pen in hand, having no clue of the chaos he had just unwittingly caused. "Here you go Teme. Thanks." Yes, he was very thankful. At this rate, Itachi would be carrying the dobi away over his shoulder within a week. Skip end of the year. He might have this in the bag by the end of the month. Itachi was in the bathroom, his palms flat against the wall as he stared at himself in the mirror. He kept taking deep breaths, trying to will away the sudden hard-on he was sporting. He growled to himself. He was an Uchiha. Uchihas prided themselves on their control. So what in the world had happened to his? Because right now he couldn't seem to achieve any. He looked himself in the eye. What are you doing Itachi? He wasn't supposed to feel this way. He was the Ice King. He didn't need anyone in his life. There was no way. But Uchihas also knew to look at facts. Itachi couldn't deny his current, he looked down, problem. He also couldn't deny the foreign feelings he displayed at Amaterasu the other night every time Neji was near Naruto. And he certainly could not deny that, from day one, the blonde intrigued him. Itachi groaned and lightly tapped his forehead against the mirror over and over again. At least he'd finally gotten rid of his little problem. But a bigger problem resided in its place. Because, for the first time in his 33 years of living, he was attracted to someone. And for the first time since he was a child, he didn't know what to do. Naruto grumbled and tossed another outfit on the floor with the rest of the reject pile. It was early Friday morning. In exactly 12 hours 28 minutes and 42 seconds he would be sitting in a living room full of Uchihas. Why, oh why did he always end up in these situations? It was all the Tame's fault. He tossed another tie into the pile. It unnerved him, the prospect of meeting the parents of Itachi and Sasuke Uchiha. What would they think of him? An orphan, no degrees to speak of, and he was never good with all that etiquette crap. Oh God, just shoot him already. Besides, how was he supposed to face the object of his now very active dreams? Yes, he was dreaming of Itachi now. Why the hell did they have to be so damn vivid? Waking up with morning wood or slippery boxers was no fun. He growled and yanked at his blonde hair in frustration. Maybe he could get out of it. A well-timed excuse couldn't hurt, right? Unfortunately, Sasuke would see right through it. Maybe he could feign illness and not go to work. A sick day sounded really good right now. His cell phone rang a familiar jingle. Hello? Good morning Usura Tonkachi. Naruto groaned. Teme, what do you want? Just making sure you weren't going to try calling in sick to get out of going to my parents' house tonight. Damn, why would I do that? On the other side of the line Sasuke was thinking, for the same reason I would. But if he had to go, so did Naruto. Who knows Dobi? Just making sure. Yeah Teme. I'll be there. Oh, and be on time Dobi. I mean it, I am still your employer, despite what you may believe. I'll be on time okay, geez. Now get off before I'm late. A chuckle. Bye Dobi. Naruto glared at the phone like it was his worst enemy. He wanted to throw it, jump on it, and smash it to bits. But it was a company phone, so Sasuke would kill him. He grumbled, putting the phone on the dresser and kept looking through ties. Aha, finally. Naruto stopped searching and grabbed a towel and jumped in the shower. Sitting at the bottom of the drawer was a solitary tie, devoid of orange. Sasuke stood by the elevator, leaning against the wall and looking at his watch. The ticks counted upward or downward, depending on the point of view. In Sasuke's case, he was counting down. The elevator doors opened and into the hall stepped a winded Naruto. He turned, seeing who was, at the moment, the bane of his existence, and glared with every bit of negative emotion he could muster. Sasuke ignored him, looking back down at his watch and then back at his friend. You almost didn't make it Dobi. Shut up Teme. I'm on time for once, so don't bother me. Sasuke probably would have said something more if he hadn't been shocked into silence. He looked Naruto up and down, closed his eyes and then opened them up again to make sure he wasn't imagining things. There was a distinct lack of a certain color. Sasuke blinked. Not one stitch of orange. At all. This calls for a celebration. He would have danced if he wasn't in public. In fact, he looked closer. He bought him that tie. He had always assumed that Naruto burned all the ties he bought, since he never saw the Dobi in any of them. Nervous Dobi? Sasuke gestured to the tie. Naruto glared, knowing Sasuke had hit the nail right on the head. Shut up Teme. Itachi locked himself in his office after informing Sakura that he was not to be disturbed for any reason. He tapped his fingers on the desk waiting for his computer to boot. Meanwhile, his thoughts floated between a certain blonde and family dinner. Unfortunately, those thoughts began to intersect since those two immovable objects were on a collision course. Now whether it would be a disaster of colossal proportions or love at first sight remains to be seen. Knowing his mother, she would immediately begin to gush over the blonde. His father, though, was the wild card. He really didn't know how he'd react. Knowing how much his father wanted little Uchiha babies running around, he'd probably be pissed. He hoped mother hadn't told him that Naruto was his boyfriend. Or else the dinner might just be upgraded from bad to miserable. Obviously, he would tell them it was a misunderstanding, but getting his mother to accept it was a whole different thing. And his dear little brother, the start of this whole mess, refused to take Naruto with him, citing the need to pick up Hinata. Such a lame excuse, damn him. He had now been designated the one to pick up Naruto and bring him to the Uchiha home. The last thing he wanted was to be stuck in the same vehicle with the man that he somehow gained an attraction toward. This whole scenario was destined to go badly, at least for him. Itachi and Naruto both had the same exact expressions of dread on their faces as they walked up the stairs to their doom. The door. Both of them had been silent through the entire car ride. Each of them had too much on their minds to make any sort of conversation. Itachi took a deep breath and raised his fingertip to ring the doorbell, while Naruto was behind him looking slightly ill. Before he had a chance to push the button, the door was thrown wide open and bright light flooded the porch. Itachi dear, you made it. God help me. Itachi was gripped in a huge hug. How could a woman so tiny be so strong? Oh, you look so handsome. I'm so glad you could come. Makoto gushed. Like I had a choice. Makoto looked behind Itachi at the blonde, who was hoping to go unnoticed. Fat chance with bright hair like his. And you must be the boyfriend. All of Naruto's thoughts derailed and his eyes were wide as saucers. Wait, the what? He gaped at the woman in front of him. Both of them were yanked inside before Naruto could begin to even make sense of her statement. Sasuke and Hinata sat back and watched from the background. Sasuke was actually wishing for some popcorn because he knew this was going to be good. Itachi was suddenly face to face with his father, who did not look happy. If Itachi had not been a proper Uchiha, he might have cringed. But he wasn't called the Ice King for nothing. Is this true? Fugaku asked. Cold, almost identical dark eyes held Itachi's own. Itachi opened his mouth to answer, but he was interrupted by a gasp from Makoto. Her eyes were wide and her hand flew up to her mouth. Fugaku turned his attention to his wife and then looked past her, taking note of the boyfriend for the first time. He almost gasped himself at what he was actually seeing. Mother, you okay? Itachi asked. Suddenly Naruto was being squeezed the life out of by the much smaller woman. Naruto, sort of in a panic, flicked his eyes toward Itachi, who shrugged at the woman's antics. When she let go, they saw tears in her eyes. Fugaku stared at Naruto for a full minute. Sasuke and Hinata stared in confusion at the strangeness of the whole thing. Naruto shuffled his feet, completely embarrassed by all the scrutiny. You look so much like him. Makoto elaborated in a loud whisper as she wiped the tears from her eyes. Naruto was completely confused. Her explanation didn't help any. And the more time he spent in the foyer, the more he thought the family was completely wacky and he needed to get the hell out of there. What is your name? Fugaku's stern voice broke the silence. Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki. This caused a new flood of tears and another crushing hug. Mother, let him go. Come on. Itachi was trying to peel her off of the blonde. He was sure Naruto was probably already resolving to never ever step foot near their house again. Sasuke groaned. He had no clue what was going on, but his family had to be going batty. When they'd finally gotten her away from the blonde, Hinata wrapped an arm around the crying woman, trying to calm her down. Itachi came up to Naruto and tried to reassure the wary male. Don't worry, she's not always like this. She's just been through a bit of a shock. Naruto tilted his head in question. Itachi smiled slightly, trying to put him at ease. You'll see. Sasuke looked up at his brother, confused. What is going on? Itachi shrugged nonchalantly. Mother saw a ghost. So you are Minato and Kushina's son. Fugaku's steely eyes were focused on Naruto. Makoto had finally settled down and they were all in the living room. Naruto sat nervously in a chair in the corner. He kind of felt like he was being cross-examined. The oldest Uchiha was quite intimidating. Naruto swallowed hard and nodded. You don't go by Namikaze. Naruto was wondering why every time the man asked a question it wasn't really phrased as a question. No, I was sick of seeing pity every time someone saw my last name. So I just used my mother's. HN. Yes, he was an even more intimidating version of the Ice King. So what do you do? Actually, I work for your company. Fugaku's eyebrow raised. Really? What was it with the eyebrow raise thing? A family trait or something? Yes, father, he works with me. Sasuke answered. Fugaku's eyes narrowed at the wording Sasuke used. With? Warning alarms sounded in Itachi's head. He knew where his father was going with that one-word question and he knew it didn't bode well. Sasuke stared back at his father, not backing down. Yes, with. He's the director of marketing and public relations. The branch wouldn't be half as successful without him. He's very good at what he does. Itachi's deep voice added in as reassurance. Naruto looked around in surprise. Not only did the Teme stick up for him, but so did Itachi. He knew from the questions Fugaku asked, that he was trying to intimidate him. It felt good to have backup. Fugaku relaxed in his chair. HN. Both brothers breathed a sigh of relief. Their father conceded, for now anyway. Makoto figured it was time to change the subject and sat next to Naruto and gave him a smile of reassurance. I know you're probably wondering about my sanity at this point. It was just a bit of a shock, you know? You see, your parents were great friends of ours. Naruto's eyes widened and he looked over at Sasuke, who seemed to be just as surprised as Naruto. He turned to Itachi. Itachi nodded. Why didn't anyone tell me? His grandparents were really his only connection to his parents and they were always gone traveling around the world without a care. And now to find out he had another connection, and they were people he already knew. Sasuke wouldn't have known. You're both the same age, you know, so he was just a baby. Itachi was a little boy then. He met you once, although he probably wouldn't remember much of it. You were such a cute little thing. Naruto looked over at Itachi, who smirked. He blushed and quickly turned back to Makoto. After your parents died, we wanted to adopt you. The shocks didn't seem to be ending for Naruto. Adopted? By the Uchihas? He and Sasuke could have been brothers? Itachi, the star of his nightly dreams, might have been his brother? He cringed at the thought. But Tsunade and Jiraiya wouldn't allow it. They said they refused to allow you to turn out like the rest of the Uchihas. What was so wrong with being an Uchiha? Naruto wondered. He looked first at Fugaku, then Itachi, and finally to Sasuke. Okay, scratch that. At first glance, they all seemed like cold-hearted, uptight, proud, overbearing, antisocial, evil bastards. But they weren't so bad once you got to know them. Well, at least Sasuke and Itachi anyway. He wasn't so sure about Father Uchiha. Actually, the Teme still was a cold-hearted, uptight, proud, overbearing, antisocial, evil bastard. He just overlooked it all. And well, you know what happened after that. There were so many changes for you. Fugaku and I talked about it and decided it would be better not to get in touch with you. Your life was in such disarray, we figured you were better off without us causing more problems. Naruto nodded in understanding. But now, here you are, back in our lives again. It must be fate. I can't believe you're Itachi's boyfriend. There's that word again. Mrs. Uchiha? Oh, you've made me so happy. Sasuke winced. Itachi covered his eyes with one pale hand. He could practically see the hearts in her eyes and around her head. Who knew his own mother was a yaoi fangirl? Mrs. Uchiha, about that. She wasn't even listening. Now she had turned her attention to Itachi. No wonder you never liked the girls we picked for you, dear. I never thought you were gay. Mother. Itachi glared at his mother. He couldn't believe she said that in front of everyone. Naruto was blushing deep red and slumped down in his chair, wishing he could disappear in the seat cushions. Sasuke was almost in tears, trying to hide behind his wife in order to keep his laughter hidden from everyone. Except Hinata was having a hard time holding in her laughter as well. Fugaku was glaring at his son. Itachi could see the promise of a long talk later. Itachi, honey, don't be shy. We completely support you, don't we, Fugaku? Fugaku? Itachi took the pause and ran with it. Mother, father, it's not what you think. This is just a huge misunderstanding. Naruto is not my boyfriend. Naruto looked back up. Of course it was a misunderstanding. He knew that, but why did hearing those words hurt his heart so much? What? But you were together. We were at a club with friends. We happened to dance together. That's all. Oh, can you say awkward? Oh, it looks like dinner is ready. Thank you, Makoto. Saved by the food, dinner went much smoother. Now that Fugaku knew Naruto was not the boyfriend, he stopped glaring daggers at his son and stopped being so standoffish toward Naruto. Right now, Makoto was in the middle of telling a story about his parents. But your father wouldn't take no for an answer. He ended up following her around for days and days until she finally agreed to a date just to get him away from her. Naruto joined the others in laughing. He was happy to hear stories about the parents he never really got to know. He almost felt like part of the Uchiha family for a moment in time. So, would anyone like more sake? Naruto stood up. Don't get up, Mrs. Uchiha. I'll get my own. Relax. Makoto did as he asked and sat back down while Naruto stood up and started walking toward the bar to pour himself a drink. Hinata saw the direction he was going and grinned evilly as he got close to where she was sitting. Sasuke watched his wife, wondering what evil thoughts were going through her head. As soon as Naruto walked by, she slightly stuck out one dainty foot. Naruto tripped, flailing his arms as he tried to keep his balance but failed. Squeezing his eyes shut, he fell forward. Right onto Itachi. More specifically, his lips landed on Itachi's. Itachi's eyes went wide. Fugaku's mouth dropped open. Sasuke stared. Makoto squealed. Hinata sported a smirk. And the last person to know what was going on slowly opened his eyes and suddenly blushed like one of Sasuke's favorite foods, his eyes almost bugging out. He was kissing Itachi. He was kissing Itachi. Naruto ran through a gamut of emotions: happiness, worry, fear. Happy that he was kissing the object of his late-night desires. Worry that Itachi was disgusted and that Sasuke would never let him live this down, teasing him for the rest of his life. Fear that either Itachi or Fugaku would kill him. Naruto pushed himself off with a smack, swiftly moving backwards only to fall on his backside. He blinked and pressed a finger to his lips, trying to confirm in his mind that what happened actually did happen. Itachi blinked in shock. That was unexpected. His lips tingled slightly and he had the sudden urge to lick the remnants of Naruto's taste from them. Sasuke turned incredulous eyes onto his devilish wife. She smiled and shrugged slightly. She had to put a hand over her mouth to stop the giggle when she saw the words, "You are the devil," leave her husband's lips. Then she turned to Naruto, who still had yet to move from his seat on the floor. "Oh, Naruto, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to trip you like that." That broke the still blushing Naruto from his stupor and he jumped up, forgetting all about the drink, and excused himself, practically running to the nearest bathroom. Sasuke made a show of patting his wife's hand. "Don't worry, dear. I'm sure he knows it was an accident." Itachi finally recovered and sat straighter, not daring to look at his father, who he knew would show disapproval. Nor his mother, who was probably gushing over the whole thing. And definitely not his brother, who he knew was enjoying every bit of this. In fact, he wouldn't be surprised if he had somehow orchestrated this. He flicked his eyes over to his sister-in-law. No, she wouldn't do something deliberate like that. Makoto was smiling. Her son might deny that Naruto was his boyfriend, but he never actually said he didn't like males. The female Uchiha was very perceptive, and as she watched her son, she could tell he wasn't disgusted at all by the kiss. And he didn't look all that adverse to the person who locked lips with him either, despite him declaring otherwise. She looked over at her other son and daughter. There was no question in her mind that the two had something to do with what just happened. At that moment, Hinata happened to look right at her. Makoto winked at her and Hinata blushed slightly, knowing she was caught. Sasuke wondered why she was blushing and looked over at his mother, who had a grin on her face. Sasuke stopped himself from grinning. He had just found himself another ally in his plot to get Itachi laid. The rest of the night went by without a hitch. There was no mention of the incident. Naruto had spent 10 minutes in the bathroom willing away the blush that seemed to have been permanently taking up residence, before coming back to the living room. More stories were told. Some about Minato and Kushina. Others about the Uchiha brothers' antics as children. By the time it was all over, Naruto was practically one of the family. Makoto had hugged him again at the door. Fugaku shook his hand. "Now Naruto dear, feel free to come by any time. Thanks Mrs. Uchiha. Oh please, call me Makoto. We're practically family." If Naruto wasn't in the presence of so many, he might have cried. The word family was something he didn't get to hear that often. It was nice to know that she thought of him that way. The group said their goodbyes and descended the stairs toward their waiting cars. Naruto practically attached himself to his best friend. There was no way he was going home with Itachi, not after what happened. "Itachi, thanks for the ride. I think I'll just hitch one with the Teme now." "No way Dobi. Why should I take you home?" "Because it makes sense. I don't live that far from you. Itachi lives on the other side of town. Why should he have to go out of the way?" "It does make sense, little brother." Itachi readily agreed with the blonde. He didn't think having Naruto in his car for any period of time right now was a good idea. It was awkward enough on the way here. He couldn't even imagine what it would be like going home. Sasuke sighed. There was no way out of it, he supposed. If he argued too much, Itachi would get suspicious. "Fine Dobi. Hurry up and get in then." "Shut up Teme. Don't rush me. I'll take as long as I want." Take too long and you'll get left." "Grr, stupid Teme." Naruto grumbled as he waved once more at Itachi and then at the parents on the porch before getting in the car. Itachi shook his head and drove off toward his home, where he knew nothing but self-analyzing awaited him. Back on the porch, Fugaku and Makoto stood watching their sons leave. "It turned out to be such a nice dinner, didn't it, dear? I'm so glad we got to meet Naruto. He's such a nice young man. It would be nice if he and Itachi did get together though." Makoto turned and went back inside. Fugaku choked lightly, following who he considered a slightly delusional wife inside. Those bright red numbers were mocking him, Itachi had decided. It was 3:30 in the morning and his eyes were wide open. Why? He had too much on his mind. No, well, if he wanted to be more specific, he had too much of him on his mind. Yes, Naruto. The blonde-haired, blue-eyed object of his obsession. It was all Sasuke's fault though. Kisami's too. Stupid club. Stupid picture. Stupid little brothers wanting to get back at you for who knows what. How his mother took one little picture and assumed that he and the blonde were in a relationship, he couldn't understand. Considering the strange way it began, the dinner had ended up going rather well, really. The beginning, understandably, was shaky. His father was downright cold as ice. His mother was ecstatic at the idea of the two being together and then went a little crazy once she learned his so-called boyfriend was the long-lost son of Minato Namikaze. Naruto just kept blushing. He looked so cute when he blushed. And for God's sake, why did it take him so long to admit the whole convoluted mess was a misunderstanding? A whole lot of father's inquisition of the blonde would have been avoided. His mother's fangirling would have been avoided. Naruto wouldn't have felt so uncomfortable. And he could have stopped his, now considered evil, brother from hiding his laughter at the whole situation. Sasuke, damn him. At least after his statement of denial. Although now he wasn't so sure he wanted to deny it, the chill disappeared from his father's demeanor, his mother calmed down, and Naruto stopped blushing. Pity, he kind of missed the blonde blushing. But of course, when you thought nothing could get worse, it did. He touched his lips with a finger. Yes, it was accidental. But looking back now, he kind of wished it wasn't. Thus, the reason he couldn't sleep. Because every time he closed his eyes it was all he could see. That tanned face so close to his, those wide sky blue eyes staring at him in shock and maybe a little something more, those slightly chapped lips attached to his. No one in the room had any idea how much he really wanted to slide the tip of his tongue over those lips just to see how Naruto would respond. He was curious. No, maybe more than that. He wanted a taste. He wanted to see what the other man tasted like. That brings up a whole new topic. It begged the question, was he gay? Itachi didn't think so. The thought of a man in his bed made him cringe in disgust just as much as the thought of a woman in that same position. So really, it was just Naruto. Naruto was the only person he could imagine kissing. Naruto was the only man he could imagine in his bed. Naruto was the only one he could imagine waking up next to every single day for the rest of his life. He wanted Naruto. Only Naruto. And what an Uchiha wants, an Uchiha gets. Naruto tossed and turned, and tossed and turned, and tossed and turned again. Finally, he growled and sat up, throwing the pillow into the darkness, hearing it strike the nearest wall. It wasn't helping him right now anyway. He glared at the blinking numbers in the darkness. They read 3:30 a.m. He couldn't sleep, damn it. At least it was Saturday. He didn't have to work. But still, he wanted to sleep. But no, he couldn't do that. His mind was too busy replaying what he had now dubbed, the incident. Of course, it was an accident. What were the odds that he would trip over a foot and land fully in the lap of the man he was attracted to, aligned exactly in the position for their lips to meet perfectly? If odds were that good, he should have played the lottery. He could do the exact same thing over and over again verbatim, and he doubted it would ever again achieve the same desired result. If that was fate, it was cruel. So cruel to allow him a taste of the forbidden fruit, when all it would do was make him want more of it. He was sure Itachi was probably disgusted by it, even if he didn't show it. No one said anything about it, probably because they all wanted to forget it. He didn't think he'd ever be able to face the man again. But he would die happy if he could have another chance at that. Oh God, his dreams would be even more vivid now if he could ever get to sleep again. You see, now it wasn't just a visual anymore. It was also taste, touch, smell, sound. He could remember it all. The slight taste of sake, the feel of those soft lips on his, the hint of sake as well as a scent that was all Itachi. As he stared in shock into similar shocked eyes, he could make out all the dark hues that made up Itachi's irises. Close enough to see that the eyes were not truly black but a deep dark brown. Lastly, he heard the slight moan that he wasn't sure came from him or the Uchiha, as well as the brief smacking sound that was made when their lips suddenly parted. His senses were now completely full of the Uchiha and he wasn't sure if he could deal with all of that showing up in his dreams. He groaned, flopping back on the flat mattress, sans pillow, pulling at spiking strands of hair. What could he do now? He was way beyond attraction now. It was bordering on that L-word territory, even though he hardly knew the man. He sat up again, eyes wide in realization. Oh my God, this means I'm gay. Oh God, could his life get any more complicated? How the hell did this happen? He remembered very well being attracted to girls all through school. He flirted with hordes of them. Dated a few of them, albeit not for very long. For some reason, girls always looked to him as the sweet male best friend everyone loved to hang out with. Oh, isn't that always a sign? It was in all the movies and TV shows. Oh my god, he was gay. For Itachi, Sasuke was going to kill him. Fugaku was going to kill him. Well, at least Makoto would be happy. Itachi? Well, he wasn't really sure how he would take it. He seemed to take the whole misunderstanding thing fairly well. Of course, that was different from him finding out that Naruto really was willing to be the boyfriend. And Dad? How would he feel about this? He was a very tolerant person, but was he really that open-minded? Would he be disappointed? Would he be angry? Or maybe he would be okay with it. Yeah, think positive. Oh no, he hoped he wouldn't get another speech. The last one was embarrassing enough. Iruka's so single-minded in his protection of him. He'd probably threatened poor Itachi with pain and death without giving anyone a chance to explain anything. That would be even worse. He moaned and fell back on the mattress, slamming his head back over and over. He hated his life, and he wasn't going to get any sleep tonight. An insistent knocking woke Naruto from his troubled sleep. He groaned and tried to roll over and ignore it. But whoever was knocking was persistent. Arg! Naruto threw the covers off and stumbled towards the door, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He threw the door open with a vengeance. What? Now is that any way to say hello to your guardian? The sleepy half-closed eyes suddenly widened with awareness. Dad? He mumbled sleepily. A tall man stood in front of the door. He had his hair in a high ponytail. A scar went across his face and he had a bright smile on his face. Hello Naruto. Dad. Naruto grinned, now wide awake, and made to pull him inside. Wait a minute, I have a surprise that I brought with me. He reached to the side and pulled a pale young man next to him. He had deep red hair and green eyes. But the most distinctive part was the tattoo on his forehead. Gaara! Naruto yelled in excitement, this time making good on his previous actions, and yanked both of them inside. What are you both doing here? Iruka took a seat on the couch while Gaara took the seat next to him. Naruto went to his bedroom, stretching along the way, and grabbed a t-shirt, pulling it over his head as he walked back to the living room. Well, since I'm on vacation, my best friend Genma asked me to stay with him for the weekend. You remember him, right? He lives here in the city. Naruto nodded and walked toward the kitchen to get some water. Now you know I would never come all the way to Tokyo and not spend at least a day with you. As for Gaara, I just happened to run into him on the train. I'm here with Kankuro. The monotone voice added, I came to see if I could stay with you. I refused to share with him and his puppets. Sure you can stay. Naruto yelled from the kitchen. Kankuro doing another round of puppet shows? Yes. The next 3 days. We leave Monday evening. Cool. So we have the whole weekend. Naruto walked back in, tossing each of the males a bottle of water, opening his own and chugging it down. So, long night Naruto? Iruka asked. Kinda. Why? Because it's almost 12:30 and you were still in bed. Ah yes, that. It's that late? His stomach took a moment to reveal how late it was. Iruka laughed. How about I take you both out to lunch? Who am I to refuse free lunch? Naruto replied with a grin. He grabbed his friend's bag. I'll throw your stuff in my room, Gaara. Be right back, I gotta go shower. Gaara and Iruka sat on the couch. Gaara was content to sit quietly. Iruka got up and looked around the living room. Various photos and other knick-knacks adorned shelves around the room. He saw old pictures of himself with Naruto, some of Naruto and the Tsubakas, and Naruto with Sasuke. Another particular picture that was sitting near the back of one of the shelves caught his eye. Well, that's interesting. He stared at it for a bit until he heard Naruto moving around and assumed he was out of the shower. Hey Naruto, how's Sasuke doing? Oh the Teme, he's fine. Iruka shook his head. You still call each other names? Of course, he really is a Teme after all. We should invite him to lunch with us. It's been a year or so since I've seen him. He'd probably be too busy or something. Won't know unless you ask. You're going to make me call him, aren't you? Naruto grumbled. Iruka smiled, knowing Naruto couldn't argue. He could almost see his eyes rolling even if he wasn't in the room. Naruto sighed and rolled his eyes, then grabbed his phone and pushed one button. He wasn't all that sure he wanted to show his face to his friend after last night's embarrassing affair. Hello Dobi. Yo Teme. My dad's in town. He wants to see if you'll come to lunch with us. Please say no, please say no. I can't, I'm working on something. Tell him hello though. Yes. Alright. I guess I'll. Wait. There was a pause. He could faintly hear Hinata in the background. Hinata said, "Come over here. She'll make you lunch." No. Naruto could already hear his plans crashing and burning. "Well, actually there are 3 of us. I have someone else with me too. Just come over, Dobi." "Fine, we'll be there soon. Since she's doing all the work, I'm gonna stop by the store and get dessert." "Well, you know what to get me." "Uh-huh. Dark chocolate covered strawberries. Oh, and get some Pocky." Naruto raised a brow. He never asked for Pocky before. Who wanted Pocky? "Alright Teme. See you later. Bye." He walked in the living room dressed in a orange hoodie and old faded blue jeans that were slightly frayed at the bottom. He glared at his guardian. "You know I hate you, right? And I love you too, Naruto." Sasuke put his cell phone away and looked at his wife. "He'll be here soon. He's bringing another person too." Hinata smiled and nodded, going back to the stove and added enough food for 3 more. Sasuke then looked over at Itachi, who was sorting through papers. "And he's coming with your Pocky." Itachi tensed up slightly. Inwardly, Sasuke was grinning. He neglected to tell the Dobi exactly who was here. If he had, he was sure Naruto would have bowed out with some kind of lame excuse. Naruto probably didn't want to be anywhere near Itachi after last night. And Itachi seemed a little tense when he mentioned Naruto was coming. Could it be that Itachi enjoyed that kiss more than he let on? He looked shocked at first, but as usual that patented Ice King look replaced it, and he never showed any other emotions afterward, so he wasn't sure. But he looked a bit nervous just now. Sasuke chuckled. This luncheon was certainly unexpected, but definitely perfect timing. But this time, he didn't have a plan. Guess he and Hinata would just have to wing it. Maybe he would just sit back and watch the sparks fly. That would be fun. Itachi, meanwhile, was thinking of what to do. He had decided he wanted Naruto. But what was he supposed to do now? He really wasn't sure how to go about it beyond just pulling him into his body, kissing him until he couldn't breathe and declaring the blonde as his. He hadn't planned on the possibility of seeing the blonde until at some point during the work week, so he hadn't given much thought on what to do if he actually saw Naruto before that time. He groaned and rubbed his temples. He hated not having more experience with these kinds of situations. Naruto was just tying his shoes and was about to grab his keys when. "So, who's this?" Naruto followed the pointing finger to what was probably the last picture one would ever want an overprotective guardian to see. It was the picture he clipped from the newspaper of him and Itachi at Amaterasu. He blushed full scarlet. No one, really? And just the fact that this, no one, person has his hands all over you like that, as well as the fact that you're turning into a strawberry at the face tells me different." Naruto winced at the look he was given. There was no avoiding Iruka Amino when he wanted an answer. "Itachi." He winced again at the look that said to elaborate. "Sasuke's brother." He mumbled. "Really? And what is he to you, him?" Naruto was twisting and untwisting his fingers nervously. Dad? Do we really have to talk about this right now?" Naruto was downright scared to death of having to talk about Itachi with his guardian. Especially after yesterday's fiasco. Iruka noticed how uncomfortable it was making his son and decided to relent for the moment. "Alright Naruto, we won't discuss it right now. But don't think this is the end of this young man." He sent a fatherly glare in his direction to show his seriousness. As they walked out of his apartment, Naruto was praying that Iruka would somehow magically forget. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.